Spider-Man 2 is still absolutely beloved by pretty much all Spider-Man fans, and in my opinion is still the best movie. It portrayed Peter Parker's crisis of identity, as well as the moral complexity of Doc Ock in such an effortlessly flawless way. However, its sequel, Spider-Man 3, while not nearly as good, introduced a plot device used to show Peter's dark side with the Venom symbiote, and honestly, I've always thought that it might have actually been a better fit for Spider-Man 2, where he was going through more struggles. So, what if Venom was in Spider-Man 2? So we start the movie off pretty much the same way that we did, with Peter struggling heavily at multitasking his various responsibilities, both as Spider-Man and Peter Parker. We see him begin losing his will to be Spider-Man, and his powers start failing him. He gets fired from his pizza job, he owes rent to Mr. Ditkovich, he's behind on all of his assignments in college, Harry Osborn is starting to turn on him, and Mary Jane is frustrated with him because he hasn't had time to go see her performance on stage. And we also see Otto Octavius become Dr. Octopus, and we see the planetarium scene, aka the worst night of Peter Parker's life. MJ tells him that he's become nothing more to her than an empty seat, and she accepts John Jameson's marriage proposal, and then we see Harry slapping Peter twice out of anger for not telling him Spider-Man's identity and helping him with his revenge. And now on his way home, he once again falls down while trying to swing, and he has his vision talk with Uncle Ben about why he doesn't want to be Spider-Man anymore. However, before Peter can throw away his suit, we see the Venom symbiote attach itself to him. So now suddenly he feels better than he's felt in months. His powers come back to him with full force, and he's able to juggle his responsibilities at long last. He does better in school, he's able to pay his rent, and he even goes to see MJ's play. However, we also see the darkness that's beginning to spread over him. When he tells Aunt May what really happened that night with Uncle Ben's death, and she's horrified at him, he becomes agitated. Instead of looking sad and remorseful, he looks a bit frustrated by this reaction. Aunt May was all he had left, and now seemingly she doesn't want anything to do with him either, and that just kind of pisses him off. So he takes his anger out on criminals, breaking bones and becoming a lot more frightening. The Daily Bugle continues to slander him, and Peter becomes really incensed, and he even gets into an argument with JJ about the way he's portraying Spider-Man, which causes him to get fired. We then see him taking his pictures to a rival newspaper company out of spite. So then Peter goes on his date with MJ at the cafe, and the two actually start to argue a little bit, and he basically shouts that she has no idea what he's going through. But before the conversation can go any further, that's when Doc Ock arrives to kidnap Mary Jane. Peter puts on the black suit to rescue her, and we get the epic train chase, but Peter is a lot more brutal towards Doc Ock in this fight. He takes the fight directly to him, and at one point he nearly kills him by throwing him off the train. In the end, he still derails the train, but this time it's more out of desperation to soften him up, because he's getting his ass kicked by Spider-Man right now. Now, Peter still stops the train, and it takes all of his energy, so then Doc is able to easily knock Peter out and takes him to Harry Osborn in exchange for the tritium, as he did. So now Harry tries to take the mask off, but the symbiote actually prevents him from doing so, because it has natural security. So Peter wakes up, knocks the knife out of Harry's hand, and just angrily shouts at him to tell him where the hell Doc Ock and Mary Jane are. Now Harry initially refuses, saying he's not going to help the man who killed his father, and Peter is just like, tell me now or the woman you love will die as well. And now Harry is scared shitless right now, but reluctantly tells him where to go. So yes, Harry does not find out who Spider-Man is in this movie. So now Peter goes off for his final battle against Doc Ock, and we see that during the fight, the solar energy is actually burning away the symbiote from Peter. So yeah, because in the comics, the symbiote was vulnerable to fire. So he loses the black suit and gets his red version back. He manages to defeat Doc Ock under his own power, and in the end, he still sacrifices himself to save New York. And MJ still learns that Peter is Spider-Man. And as they go off into the night, we see that some of the symbiote managed to linger on. So now Peter, free of the anger, goes back to the Daily Bugle, and he apologizes to JJ for his behavior. And at first he of course doesn't accept, since he took his photos to a rival company, but when Peter gives him really good Spider-Man photos, JJ just smirks and says, "They're crap. but you're hired. So now later on we see Peter talking to Aunt May at her new apartment, and we get a very similar scene to the one we got in the actual movie, where Aunt May gives him the inspiration to keep going on as Spider-Man, even without the black suit. So we still see Mary Jane leaving her wedding, and she and Peter still end up together as they did. And the last scene in the movie, we see Harry drinking heavily by himself, and he's hallucinating about his father telling him to avenge him. And Harry says he can't because he doesn't know who Spider-Man is. But then Venom attaches itself to Harry and then says, "Don't worry, I do." And so that is my scenario for Venom being in Spider-Man 2. So, do I think this is a better timeline? No, I mean, you guys should know by this point. I think Spider-Man 2 is absolutely flawless the way it is. I don't think that it needs the symbiote at all. But I do think it's debatable that it would fit better in Spider-Man 2 than in Spider-Man 3. Just because, in my opinion, he wasn't going through as much in Spider-Man 3 as he was in 2. Like, 2 is really all about, him struggling to juggle all these responsibilities. That's a tongue twister. And, yeah, he had some issues in Spider-Man 3, like his relationship with Mary Jane was going down the crapper, and, the stuff with Flint Marko killing Uncle Ben. I understand that, and, Harry trying to kill him. Like, I'm not saying he was without struggle in Spider-Man 3, but I just feel like his struggles were more relatable in 2. And I just kind of like the idea of the symbiote being used to test him. Like, when he's at his lowest point, when he feels like, he's losing his powers, and everybody hates him, and he wants to quit being Spider-Man to improve his life, just the idea of the symbiote then attaching itself to him when he's at his weakest, because the symbiote is, a symbol of addiction, that's what it's meant to symbolize. And the idea of him relying on, an addiction to get him through his struggles, I think would be a really realistic story to tell, and a very interesting one to tell. But yeah, as I said, I do think that, that the symbiote doesn't need to be in Spider-Man 2. That movie's already really, really good on its own. But now, as far as the ending to this video goes, where I made Harry Osborn Venom, I've done plenty of videos in the past now where I've done Harry Osborn as Venom. So I'm gonna say this right now, just so people don't get their hopes up, because I can especially imagine SR Striker asking me to do this. I really don't want to do a part 2 to this, and let me tell you why. It's just I've done so many videos now, it feels like, with Harry Osborn as Venom, and I just don't really feel like I have much more to add to that. I'm sorry. Like, I know it would be different with him being Venom from the beginning, but, like, I would basically have to redo most of the movie, and that just sounds like a project. That just sounds like a big project, and it would deviate so much from the actual Spider-Man 3 that I don't know if it would even feel the same, like the same movie, you know what I mean? And, yeah, I'm just not interested in making it, so I'm really sorry if I built your guys' hopes up, but I really don't want to do a part 2 to this, so I'm begging you guys, please don't ask me to do a part 2. But, I mean, okay, if enough people ask me, like, if like 10 people ask me to do part 2, I'll cave. But, like, as far as I'm concerned right now, I just really don't feel like a part 2 is really gonna, add too much. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below if you really want a part 2. Also, let me know what you think of this scenario. Would you have preferred Spider-Man 2 with the symbiote, or do you think it's better off in Spider-Man 3? Or do you think it should have just not been Spider-Man 3 either, just not in any of the movies like Sam Raimi would have wanted? Let me know all about that in the comments. Also, give me more What If recommendations down there. Give this video a thumbs up, and share it with all of your friends on all your various social media platforms, and I'll see all of you in the next video.